Hello, hello, welcome. My name's Mark Reid, and thank you for joining me for a very cool interview or discussion, just a friendly chat with our friend Nathan, who I have debated before, is a really nice guy. And yeah, Nathan, welcome to the channel, welcome to the room. How are you doing? And are you well?
Doing very good and well as well. Thank you for asking, and it's an honor to be here. I think you're delightful yourself. Pleasure going at it with you in discussion and
Hmm.
exchanging them back and forth. So something I think is important is good communication. So difficult, easy to learn, impossible to master, but vital skills. So thank you
Yeah,
very much
yeah,
for having
and
me on.
and thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I think that every time I've had a chat with you, even in debate, I've enjoyed talking to you. So it's a pleasure to have you on. Absolutely. And
Likewise.
today we're kind of talking about our two different worldviews. In the thumbnail, I kind of put you with Christianity, and that's where you're coming from, and me with atheism, I guess, is where I'm coming from. I kind of almost want to put a happy human that represents secular humanism, because that informs me a lot more. But we can discuss it. And so, were there any sort of topics that you really wanted to touch on while just straight off the bat?
Yeah. So I guess kind of you are an atheist, so I am
Mhm.
just curious kind of your if you have like a willingness to hear about, or do you ever consider like that there could be a creator, like are you strictly atheist, or do you open yourself up towards agnostic? I guess we could start
Yeah,
with
good
that.
questions. Yeah, yeah, good questions. Yeah, absolutely. Have I considered it? Yeah, absolutely have considered it. I've been to, when people invited me to a church, I went to the church. When people said, "Hey, if you can pray," I prayed with a genuinely open mind to get back whatever I get, kind of thing. So I'm more than happy to entertain any idea. Whoops, that's the wrong button. I'm sorry. Yeah, I do have a criteria for belief. Um, so, but yeah, absolutely. And so by creator, I mean, I don't know if you know much of my background, but um, at one point I did believe in the ancient aliens hypothesis, kind of thing. So that's still atheism because it's not a god, but I thought that God was astronauts. But sort of as I've progressed in my life, I realized that I don't have a lot of evidence to believe that claim. I think that I am an atheist. I don't lean agnostic. However, I do say that my atheism is provisional, and the provision is that um, basically it's provisional on the basis that we've only found minds with as a functionality of brains. Like, we haven't found any minds without a brain. So that's why I believe. I can't say that I claim to know, but I believe that you need a brain to have a mind. Um, so I think if someone could demonstrate a mind without some sort of physical brain, then I certainly would lean more towards agnosticism. I can't say it would like make me sort of believe that a God exists, but I certainly would my stance certainly would be softened.
Okay. Well, and I do think that, like you said that you, if you're around people who are praying and you'll offer to join with them and have kind of a sincere open mind, I think that probably does mean a lot for people who are of faith. So that is very kind of you. I've heard some things about, there are some atheists who are very kind of they're not too fond of people who have faith. Do you think that it is like, do you think faith, and I should say in a creator worthy of worship that is well placed and well meaning, do you think that that is something that can be valuable and beneficial to people, in a sense of like guidance towards treating one another, as a, I mean, in a science lab it's strictly natural, so you are using natural boundaries, so to speak. But
Yeah,
like
yeah,
one of the things that I say is and others as well, is like, I will never say I can prove that there is a creator, only through
right, yeah,
faith. And I think it's there's an important reason that the creator would have that for us, is like, say we had something directly written by the creator, people might get competitive and want to try to hold on to it or anything. But I think that the biggest thing is if you claim to love your creator, who you have not seen, you have to show that love towards your fellow man who you can see and who we are here with. So do you think that it's kind of is it respectable to you for people who hold faith as kind of a moral guidance?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There was a lot there, Nathan. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
sorry,
will
it's kind
address
of
it.
I ran
No,
to
no, no,
something.
no worries, no worries. So praying. I won't necessarily join in people like who are praying. I respect their choice to do so. I have done so before when people have said, "Hey, pray and you will find guidance and you will find this." I didn't. Whether that's me or them or whatever, I didn't get anything from it. But so I won't necessarily join in people praying. I think that I will respect that they can do so. I won't interrupt them or try to tell them, whatever you're doing. If people are praying before a meal at a table, I'll just sit quietly and reflect on sort of, you know, so a lot of the things that I do could maybe be seen as praying, but I don't see it that way. I maybe reflect on, the animals that have died to provide the meal or the work that's been done to provide me with what I'm eating kind of thing. But I don't thank any kind of creator for it. It's just I reflect on, if people are praying. If they're not, that's fine. But I'm not going to stop them from doing it. And you find that a lot of atheists are kind of hostile. I don't know. I mean, I do know of some atheists that are sort of very openly hostile towards anybody
And it
having
goes the other way too.
religion.
Christians as well can
Oh,
throw it
sure,
back.
yeah, no, I get you, and I don't think it's specifically any of these ideologies that's causing that. I think it's just people do that. I've found that with atheists that a lot of the people that do get hostile, they were believers in the past, and they have a lot of lingering resentment and lingering upset at the not a god, but rather at the establishments that kind of taught them these things. And you meet a lot of people who are still really afraid of a hell and don't know why, and so they sort of really resent being taught to fear. Because that kind of fear at a young age can do a lot of harm to some people. Um, the whole idea that a god can't give us a direct sign because people would be competitive. I can't envisage a way that a god giving us a direct sign would make us more competitive than we already are in religion. I mean, it's kind of, Islamic people are blowing themselves up and stuff to prove that they're religion. I can't really envisage why a creator giving a direct line to who's right would actually make us more competitive. But yeah, so I don't see that. So is religion morally? Yeah. So when we're talking about morality, I'm not looking for people to agree with me. All I'm looking for is compatibility. Here and now in the world. So if you want to treat people with respect and you want to, not kill people and you want to generally make people's lives better, as because what we've got to distinguish here is the atheist from the secular humanist, because atheism is just a position on God. It doesn't tell you anything about what I believe or what morals I have or anything like it. So as a humanist, I kind of prioritize humans first. If you're interested in making human lives better, then that's a compatible morality with that. I can work with that. I can even work with people that are selfish and want to make their own lives better, because I can make the argument that to make your own life better, if the people around you are happier and you have a more fulfilled life and things like that, it's better for you personally. I can even work with that. It's
You're
not my
increasing the whole
stance.
system, basically. Like
Right, right.
you're around
Yeah,
other people, you have connections, and so you go up, they go up.
yeah. And there's other things that they may do sort of selfishly that I might disagree with and say, hey, that's not cool. I don't, and that's where the compatibility says, hey, my moral system is not compatible with yours because you are actively hurting those around you in order to give yourself a boost up kind of thing. But if you are helping people, taking care of people, and things like that, and me as a humanist, I think that's important, then that morality is perfectly compatible with mine, and I don't see why I would sort of say, hey, stop doing that, or you can't do that in God's name. I don't really care why you're doing it. That's the thing. Like, you could be out there like being selfish and stamping down workers in order to make money and stuff. That could be something you're doing, but you're not. So I'm not
like if you're at a soup kitchen and you're ladling food for the hungry, it doesn't matter if you're atheist, if you're Christian, if you're Buddhist, if you're Islamic. It's that you're doing kind of great works for somebody else's life to improve their standard of living.
Yeah, and moreover, as somebody that sees you do that, I don't care why you're doing it. I just think it's a good thing to do. It doesn't matter why you're doing it. It really doesn't matter. I think that the major problem I have with religions, and I've touched on this before, and I'll kind of expound it a bit, is it is a safety net that I believe may not be there, and I can sort of expound on that a bit if you would like. So I really wanted to talk to you because I wanted to get across this idea, and maybe you'll understand a bit more about the atheist position and why we seem so amped up. It's because we don't believe there's anybody there to save us if we get into real trouble. Like, just say nuclear war breaks out, or the environment breaks down and suddenly things are going disastrously. A lot of theists we've heard from sort of go, oh, well, that will be the end of days, and that's a good thing. But if you sort of put yourself in our shoes, where there is no God to rescue us, that's really bad from our perspective. And so and here's the thing, like, a lot of some theists that I talk to just go, yeah, we've got to help the planet regardless, like, it doesn't really matter if there is a safety net. Just because there's a safety net doesn't mean that you don't try
we should
your
be
best.
taking care of the earth and the environment and one another, and especially like the state of like nuclear weapons or any type of explosive. Like, we shouldn't be hurting one another. We should be actively working together to resolve whatever conflicts we have. You shouldn't be trying to. I know there are certain people who teach that you should, like, there are groups of people who will say do bad because it will expedite the process and cause Jesus to return faster. When Jesus would not want that type of thing. According to his teachings, he would want us to have unconditional love for one another, and do things to slow the spreading of wickedness, what my worldview would call wickedness. We want to do things to slow that type of thing, however possible. And that would be, and if I actually real quick could just clarify too, because like I do agree that, like, if you, like, I don't think that it's right to condemn people or say like you're going to hell, or to scare children with it when they're young. I think that a proper understanding of hell is something that even a lot of Christians lack. I didn't know this for a very long time, but according to Christianity, hell was actually made for the fallen angels. And so humans, like Jesus Christ, died for all of mankind's sin. So all of us are sinners. It's not a negative. I mean, it's just a thing. According to what sin is, we have all sinned. So we are all sinners, and Jesus Christ died for all sin. And and so we are all forgiven. Hell is for the fallen angels who came to earth to show mankind how to be wicked, how to make weapons and potions and sorcery and deceit and all these types of things. So they kind of, as man fell, the fallen angels came and made us fall faster and made things get worse quicker. And so God made hell for them. Not now, there will be some people, sure, a small group, who are bad and choose evil genuinely. But I like, I don't, would you, I don't know if that's something to ask, but like, not many people would like disagree with unconditional love, with being respectful, polite to one another, and like saying like if your friend is an alcoholic and they're drinking and they're really like looking like they're going through alcohol poisoning, if they're
Mhm.
still drinking and they hold up a bottle of vodka and they're saying, I'm going to drink this whole thing right now, unconditional love would be like, hey, you don't look like you're doing well, can you please, for all of our sakes, can you stop drinking? It's tough to hear for them, but it's something you
Sure.
do out of love. It's something that human beings can't really like, we feel that towards one another. We're empathetic towards people and want to be there, comfort people if they're going through something or anything like that. So but I did want to kind of
Yeah.
clarify that hell, because
No,
I don't think we
and
should
that's
scare people.
yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and it doesn't because um, some atheists, when people that tell them they're going to hell and they've been raised in that environment where that scared them, they can react very negatively. And I kind of, having talked to so many people on the atheist side, I understand that. It's like if you grew up with someone convincing you absolutely that the boogeyman is absolutely real, and it's only when you're 20 you find out it's been made up. And I know you believe in a hell and stuff. That's from our perspective. And somebody says, "Hey, the boogeyman will get you again," you're going to be angry. You're going to say, "Hey, no, stop that." But see, from my perspective, I was never raised in that environment. I was raised in a secular household, so I it doesn't worry me in the slightest. People can tell me I'm going to hell all they want, and I don't see any reason to believe it. It doesn't worry me in the slightest. It doesn't concern me. Um, the whole idea of
Mm.
and your alcohol thing is a really good example. And sort of I know that you see that there's a bottle of alcohol there. And some things I probably agree with you as very, very harmful kind of thing, harmful for society or harmful to the individual. And I totally agree. The disagreement that comes is when you tell us that sort of bottle of alcohol is harmful, but we have water. We have something that hasn't been demonstrated to be harmful. And you're sort of, or not you, sorry, I mean sort of theists sort of say, hey, that is sinful and it's bad. And when we ask why it's bad, it's sort of because God says, because this other person we've never seen or never met says that it is.
Well,
And
if you
so,
drink alcohol, like it can be not like water, people can drown, but like if you do drink too much
sure.
alcohol, you can get alcohol poisoning. And it can
Oh, of
be like
course.
if you are continuously every day you
Mhm.
wake up and start drinking and kind of live like a drunken life, it will kind of deter your relationships or will
Sure.
deteriorate. And so I think that's kind of the substance having control over somebody more so than them having control over the substance. Some people can more
Sure.
easily succumb to alcohol.
Sure, sure, and but it's not. We're not talking about alcohol specifically here. We're talking about lifestyles that are damaging, and you're trying to warn people about the damage their lifestyle can do, not only to them but to society and the people around them as well. That's where I think that you're making that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. That's the analogy that you're kind of making. So this sinful behavior is like drinking alcohol, kind of thing.
Yeah, like if you are in danger, it's the unconditionally loving thing is to say, hey,
Mm,
this could be, your last bottle of vodka, whereas um which I know that could, sound like trying to scare somebody, but like one of the
yeah.
sayings of the world is kind of like a love is love thing. And if someone loves drinking that vodka, you should let them drink it because it's what they love. And kind of love is more like let people be a byproduct of their love, and whatever happens happens.
Well, no, I agree. I think that it might be morally virtuous to say to somebody, "Hey, that is going to be harm." Well, I think that will be harmful, and there's evidence that that's going to be harmful for you and the people around you. The disagreement kind of comes when um, we like sort of. So if you're saying that the alcohol is something like going around stealing from people, right? So just say that's, you know, that's something that you're doing, or the person in this case who's drinking alcohol, they're going around stealing, and you say, hey, stealing's really bad, it's got negative, you know, you're going to end up with a terrible life, people won't trust you, you'll push people, you know, there's all these consequences. I would totally agree with you. And, you know, to step in and say, hey, maybe think, you know, please do think about what you're doing here, your behavior and your actions. The problem comes when it's something like, you know, gay marriage, or homosexual relationships, or being trans, where the danger, you're saying that's dangerous, it will result in a bad life, and there's no evidence of that. It seems to be an argument that the God says that it's bad, but I don't believe in the God, so I don't see the harm that some of the theists are saying that occurs in it. And we can unpack those situations, but and so it's sort of like, and to sort of use your analogy, it's like if I'm drinking water, or somebody's drinking water, and they say, hey, that's really bad, and I'm sort of saying, well, how? You know, we have to, from our side, I guess, we have to have the evidence that it is actually harmful, without sort of relying on a God that we don't believe in to say it's harmful.
Yeah. So I think and so like in this case, the telling someone that the water is bad, this would be like telling someone who is homosexual that what they're doing is wrong.
Hmm.
And so and I want to clarify that I do, you know, I don't know if you have to throw up a clarification or whatever, but like I have family and friends, coworkers who are gay, and I love them. I would do anything for them. I do
Hmm.
think that with like, because to see homosexuality and what it is, even like just to real quick touch on like a an evolutionary perspective, maybe it could be argued that it keeps population in check, but if
Sure.
evolution is about survival and then passing on your genes, homosexual
Hmm.
couples are unable to pass on your genes. So if you have a gene trait that is really beneficial to society, but you are a homosexual, you're not going to be able to pass that
Hmm.
gene on and let it over time throughout the population get into the population and spread to everybody else. I do think that there are some things with homosexuality in terms of um, many people who are you know, of that kind of the rainbow. There's a lot of trauma that goes on there. There's a lot of suicide, and I know there is some bullying from Christians who like say, especially like the Westboro Baptist Church is horrible
Yeah.
because they're very just wicked for being so mean to people. But there's a lot of trauma that people have had happen in their past, and maybe especially like if you're a kid, if you're a young boy, and something happens, it can be traumatic and carry with you throughout your adulthood. Um, and then and suicide rates are very high, anxiety, sadness, depression, very high in these groups, in many people nowadays, more and more so. I think that has to do with screen time and lack of human interaction. But you do have like um so I think that getting those traumas worked out is one thing, but I also think like I actually on my channel I have an interview, or I have a discussion that I had with and there's a kid who is named Desmond is Amazing, and he has done
Mhm.
drag. He kind of gets really kind of heavily promoted, but um I talked with him. His He had an interview with this guy named Michael Alig, and Michael Alig has, because here's like one thing about is you know, homosexuality is it a choice, is it natural? But this guy Michael Alig, he talked about in an interview from the 90s how he would target straight underage boys and give them
Mhm.
drugs and alcohol, and hey, just, you know, he would send a hot girl up to this young boy and say, hey, go, you know, go say Michael's cute or whatever, and like he'd get him to kind of start doing gay things, take him back to their place with his boyfriend,
Sure.
and
Mhm.
do so. Like he was almost making it like it's a choice. You can choose for people to be, people can choose to be gay or this or that. And like with bisect or like non-binary and trans and stuff right now is really popular. There's a huge increase in percentage of population that is trans or binary or any of these things. And I think that this type of thing is, it's not, I mean, people can do their thing, but I think that they're, to some extent, I think, like I spoke with a man who thinks that he is a woman, and he said he was working the job he had because he made so little that he got good insurance. So in last November, he could get a $35,000 surgery paid for, which is completely elective, not for health reasons or anything. But then I work with my boss has to pay $600 a month for her diabetic medication, or she'll die. And so I think there's kind of an unfairness, but I think that the biggest thing with this is like Michael Alig, he interviewed with Desmond, and above the couch that they were interviewing, there's a painting that Michael made, and it has the word Ruhypnol on it, and which is like roofies. And Desmond, for whatever reason, in this interview, he did look droopy. I'm not saying that he was on anything, but he was under a picture, and that to me and to a lot of people who are kind of, who speak out against the LGBTQ, for as far as like drag and drag story hour and things, is these kids. You get these guys who are wearing essentially nothing but like a little strap of clothing around their groin, and they're dancing on a pole next to kids, and kids are paying money, um, uh, giving money to these adults, and they're dancing provocatively. There's one dude who had like fake implants, and he was bobbing around in a bar, and then kids showed up, and he like kind of covered himself, but he reached out to take money, and he kept going. And so I think that those types of things are part of what causes like alarm for these types of things. And but then, like, just kind of one last point, because there are a few, but one last thing I wanted to mention too is I do think if you are, if a man and a woman love each other, they're in love with each other, they're married, they are, able to plan it out, and they're fortunate enough to be able to, blessed enough, I would say, to be able to have a child. When you have a child with the person that you are in love with, that person is half you, half the person you're in love with, and then you have a responsibility as a parent, to raise that child, to set the example. You have to now go out of your way to show your child. If you're out in public and you're around, people you don't know, strangers, you're, at the store or whatever, you have to be really nice, polite, set the example, and say, hey, I'm gonna say hello and greet them, and be polite if they ask me something. Like, you stay, reserved, and treat them with respect, because you want your child to do that. Not that people can't adopt, but I've also spoken to someone who said that he himself is gay, and he says that he knows many gay people who adopt. Like, they'll adopt a boy, and then they'll raise him to be gay, and then when he turns 18, they'll kind of, you know, date him or whatever. So there are things like that, but I think it has to do with, how it's projected towards children, especially in today's culture. And then what it means to have a child, with the person that you're in love with, I think puts you onto another level of having to be a good person to set the example for your child. If you raise them and you're, um, yelling and fighting and angry and upset and, drinking and smoking and all that stuff, your child will emulate that. So I think those are kind of, not that there aren't, good homosexuals out there. I have family friends, I love them dearly. But there are, it's kind of a bigger concept, I think, or the bigger picture of how it's very in children's faces nowadays and things. Because children, I mean, you're learning how to tie your shoes at 5. You would never think about who you're attracted to if you weren't like taught it. So I think that's kind of
Okay. Well, I
covered a
think
lot there.
that
So
gay Well, yeah, I mean, I think that gay people are essentially doing the same thing that straight people are doing. That when the questions start to come up about this kind of thing, they address it with their children. And I mean, there's other ways gay people can have children. They can have surrogates. Yeah, they can adopt. There's a number of ways they can actually do it. And the first thing was sort of, well, if they don't pass on their genetic lineage, and yeah, it may be evolutionarily beneficial to sort of but have gay members of society, so population does have a lid on it. We don't know if that's the case. I've heard a number of hypotheses saying that it happens in rats too, happens in a number of animal species, that when their population swells, right, when their population swells, it seems a number of their members basically turn gay. Which is interesting, but it's not a definite conclusion that we can make. You know that, but it is a possibility, sure. And sort of with surrogates and things, they might still be able to pass on their DNA. So that's not necessarily the case that it doesn't get passed on. And the whole idea that sort of gay people have suicide at a higher rate, you know, the stigma against gay people, when it's more accepted, that suicide rate goes down. Does that mean it's entirely the case that you know, that if the stigma wasn't there, would they still have higher? We don't know, because we can't get, you know, we have no counterfactual, because the stigma has always been there and the bullying has always been there. I mean, I myself got bullied in high school for being gay, and I wasn't even gay. And you know, I had a really rough time, and I was, you know, at one point very suicidal, and
Thank goodness
I
you're
wasn't
still
able.
here, Mark.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it was a rough time, and the thing was, I wasn't even gay. That's the thing, right?
That's
It was
wrong.
just, well, it's what they suffer. You know, I remember, and you're probably not old enough to remember this, but there used to be a thing in Australia called gay bashing. And it doesn't mean to go out and pick on them. It means to literally go out and physically assault gay people. And it used to be a thing, you know, and it's horrific.
Agreed 100%.
But
100%.
that's not to say that every single gay person out there is a good person. I mean, you brought up these examples of gay people essentially raping straight people, or sexually abusing straight people, or sexually abusing their adopted children. And that's completely valid. Like, I get that.
It'd be
Um,
bad if someone
but
straight did that too. Yeah.
Exactly. You know,
Mhm.
I don't think there's any more prevalence of this kind of stuff happening with gay people than in straight community. I mean, like, you know, you can point to something like Bill Cosby, who was a monster, and you know, sort of a paragon of virtue at one point, who's just an absolute monster. You know, just because one part of a community does something, we can't condemn the entire community as being bad or wrong, or, you know, sort of wicked kind of thing, because people are different, and nobody's saying that all gay people or trans people are good people. It's
Mhm.
just that in order not to be bigoted, I have to say, well, I'm going to evaluate that person by their morals and their standards and their values, rather than by the values of this horrible person over here who I associate in the same community. It's why I sort of say, hey, there's you know, we can't lump all Christians into the same group, because if we just took Christians by the, you know, the Westboro Baptist Church, yeah, we'd see all Christians
Horrible
as, you
imagery.
know, yeah, vile people that turn up at, you know,
Funerals of
funerals,
soldiers.
and yeah, that's exactly right. So I think
Mhm.
it's important not to sort of paint with a broad brush over them.
Yeah.
Um,
To any
and
group. Like even
yeah,
atheists.
yeah,
Christians shouldn't paint atheists as
sure.
bad unanimously
And
across the board.
there's bad atheists out there. You know,
Mhm.
that's not even a question. There's people that are horrible as atheists out there. Um, but we try not to sort of, and that extends the same for gay and trans people. For me, I know there's some bad people out there, but they're just bad people. They're not. It's not that they're trans or gay that's making them bad. And this sort of thing of the huge increase in the population of the people, I don't think it's as huge an increase as you think. especially trans people, because trans people and gay people have been around us since the dawn of time. In Greek society, sort of having male love between men was not seen as a bad thing, and even women as
Pretty
well. In
common.
fact, well, the word lesbian comes as a reference from the Isle of Lesbos in Greece, where there used to be a lot of sort of women relationships in ancient Greece. This has been with us for as long as history has been there. In India, there's a separate word for a man that is basically dressing as a woman in order to fulfill that role within society. And that's been around since, biblical times, kind of thing. The trans community have been with us. What has happened is that we've shunned them and pushed them down in society so that they're not visible anymore, but they're still there. That's the thing. And sort of when you said the whole thing about sort of drag shows and as you say, over sexualization in front of children, I absolutely agree. It is a thing. But the problem is we have these extreme examples that isn't the normal behavior. Most of the drag story time, the person just dresses like a female teacher would, for instance. Like, so, like if you're a teacher, you'll know
Not
that you
like
can't.
flamboyant with it. It might
Well,
be like a
occasionally, but
pantsuit.
right. They might wear that. They might dress up a bit, kind of thing, but nothing like over sexualized. Like as a teacher, there's certain things you can't wear. Like you can't wear like a crop top kind of thing. You can't
Yeah,
wear
mini skirt
tiny
or
shorts or
anything.
right. And so most of them don't do that. But at the other side, there's also problems with over sexualization among sort of straight people as well. I've often spoken out about the child beauty pageants that they're
Ugh,
basically absolutely selling their children to make money. The Honey
yeah.
Boo Boo things and stuff. It's absolutely
Well, yeah,
appalling.
this exploitation
Um,
of children is sick. Very, very
right,
wrong.
right. Yeah,
There's even like a
that's
show
really
that I
wrong.
think there's a show on Netflix uh, dedicated.
Yeah, I know my
You there?
wife's seen that. Yeah. You just cut out for a tiny
Okay.
sec. I know
Yep.
my wife's seen that. I couldn't bring myself to watch it, to be honest with you.
No.
It was just like that seems so depressing. I
Yeah.
haven't watched the Jeffrey Dahmer thing either because that seemed so depressing. I was like, do I really? I don't feel up to this. I'll probably watch it at some point, but
Yeah.
I just didn't
Right.
feel up to it. It's just like, wow, that's going to be
You got to
depressing.
be
Uh,
mentally ready because that, I mean, I think it's a human nature. We
right.
don't want that stuff or like that stuff, which is
Yeah.
odd though, because there are some people who will say like, oh, a perfect world where nobody is hurting anyone or there's no violence or war or anything would be boring. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's strange how like a lot of people's perfect world involves having things that
Mm.
people are afraid of and that are imperfect. And we are afraid of war, but we need it because it would be boring without it. But I, and I think that there's some stuff about that we could have a instead of war,
Well,
play sports or something like that.
yeah. Like I was gonna say, sports are kind of amalgam for what. Like, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I marginally agree. People do. I mean, they love war movies. They love sort of things that are generally we would see as bad. But I don't have a problem with that. I don't really have a problem with war. Video games or anything like that. I think it's better to do that. But just one last thing on your sort of your list of things. Um,
Yeah,
you can't really raise someone to be gay, just like you can't raise them to be straight, right? There's a million people in the world that have raised their children to be straight, but they've turned out gay, and I know probably at least half a dozen people who are gay with straight kids. They just came out straight, and that's okay. Actually, one of them might be bi. One of them might be bi, but that's like I don't think you can choose what sexual orientation your children would be. If that was the case, then we wouldn't get so many, sort of Christians that say being gay is wrong, and that they get gay kids.
yeah,
It just
I do think that there are Christians who kind of mishandle the situation. Like if you disown your child, I don't think that's the right thing to do, or like sending them to like a conversion camp or anything like that. Like I don't
Yeah.
think those are the proper means to really get to the root of the situation, because like if someone was at school and something happened to them, they were, you know, abused or something, and that trauma stuck with them, and over time it became you know, because a lot of gay people have been traumatized, and so if that was the cause, or
Yeah.
other um then you want to go through the right channels and really treat the issue at the root, rather than, you know, send them off somewhere or cold shoulder them or anything like that. So I do think that there is it's because it's a very delicate situation, and um
Mm.
I think that there are it's not easy to handle that stuff. So I think that it's because
So
Christian what
getting
go
back
ahead.
to the moral systems and how we find common ground, can you explain to me why being gay is bad, or evil or wicked or whatever you say? Like, so why is that a bad thing?
So yeah, so I wouldn't say bad. It's a sin. But like I'm a sinner as well. I'm no better than someone. I have sinned differently, but I am not better. I'm not any less loved by the creator or more loved than someone who is homosexual. But I think why my kind of understanding to why the creator put that kind of restriction on marriage and on which, by the way, one like with marriage, I think Christian marriage is a Christian term. It means a man and a woman unioned with God in a relationship, two becoming one. One plus one equals one, two, three. One, two, and three is kind of that's a marriage is a Christian thing. So I do think because homosexual or the LGBT kind of disavows religion, it would be nice if you really just want rights from the government, just call it like a civil union or something and have all your state rights, federal rights, and everything, but leave the term for the people whose kind of term that is. That'd be like a homosexual turning 13 and saying it's a bar mitzvah birthday or something like that. So like keep let religious people have their term. You get the rights and tax purposes and everything. You can have all that. But I think why there is this restriction on marriage is because, say you allow homosexuality because this guy feels that he should be able to be in love with this other guy. One second.
Sure.
My roommate's cat likes to chill in here. So okay, but you have this guy who likes this guy now. So love is love, right? He loves this guy. It
Hmm.
doesn't involve you. He
Yeah.
doesn't have a choice. It's not him. It's, you know, it's who he is. Okay,
Hmm.
so you have that. But now, what do you do if you have a guy who, or he thinks he's a girl? Well, it's not him. It's who he is. Um, so now, what about the guy who thinks that he is a deer, or someone who thinks that they are transabled, where they think that they should be blind, even though they're not. Even there was a person who actually poured bleach on their eyes because their doctor wouldn't recognize them as blind. So you like, is that okay? And so if you're transabled, can you be trans race? Can you be trans age? Which gets into, can you, if this guy loves this other guy and he can't
Hmm.
help it, what about the person who loves, is, you know, romantically attracted to animals or children? They can't help it. It's who they are, and it doesn't involve you. So why should that matter? Especially with how the education, and this is actually a worry of mine, and others as well, is that like right now in our educational system, public education, we're teaching younger and younger kids about um, consent and everything, which and
Hmm.
what's inappropriate to do, which is good to know. Like, you know, there's a way to teach that, but then we're also like, there have been like middle schoolers who have found books in their library that talk about, here's how these two boys were giving each other oral or I won't be they were doing explicit things, and then these are in kids libraries. Now what do you do if you have this guy who likes little boys, and he is going to say, well, he can't help it, and he asked this little boy if he wanted to do this, and the little boy knows what that is, and he learned it in school, so he is officially state recognized as knowing what it is. Now he can consent because he knows. And there are, like, those are the types of things where I think why the creator put in place man and woman is because it prevents a slope that if you allow one thing, you kind of have to then allow the next thing and the next thing. So like it was
Why?
homosexual. Well, because they can use the same arguments. If you like, if you
Yeah.
have a guy that loves a
Okay.
guy,
Well, that's actually called a slippery slope fallacy, right? So it's basically saying because we allow one thing, then chances are we'll allow the next. Chances are we'll allow the next. That's not necessarily the case. So the things that you brought up, sort of, so somebody wanting to be a deer. So man and woman are kind of social constructs. We know this to be true. There's nothing about when I say they're womanly, I'm talking about their genetics or their private parts or anything like that. What I'm doing is I'm suggesting that their behavior and their presentation is distinctly feminine, sort of associated with softness and caring and nurturing and all of these other things that are descriptive of womanly behavior.
I do think that should be all mankind, not just women. Women, good for women for having that attribution, but men should be caring as well. But I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Our idea of what makes a man has changed over the years. In past times, a man is somebody that goes out and kills people. Now, or raids them and brings back treasure, and that's what a real man is. Our definitions of what a man is has changed, even though there's nothing biological that's changed about us. So it's from things like this we know that our definitions of man and woman are social constructs. However, that's not true of a deer or a race or any of these other things. Like we don't sort of say, hey, a deer is a social construct, because it isn't. We have a definite biological and genetic, descriptor for what that is. But so there's no reason why we would apply that. And if you're talking about sort of, these little boys and stuff like that, it's there is no consent that allows you to do that. And the problem here is consent. Even with animals, you still need consent, and an animal cannot give it. So that is why it is completely wrong, and will always be wrong. Because a child cannot give consent. You need to be an adult, informed adult consent in order to do something like that. Where marriage is concerned, marriage actually used to be a state union. It used to be that the priest, in the very early Christendom, the priest wouldn't be involved at all. And in fact, if you go further back, marriage was a way of making alliances between houses. So in Roman times, in Greek times, in sort of these ancient times, it would be we don't trust one another. We want to make an alliance. We're going to marry two of our children. It was actually a way to solidify houses together rather than
secular Rome and Greece.
Well, sure. I mean, there was an overtone of religiosity. I certainly won't lie. Polytheist. Yeah. So obviously Aphrodite governed love. Hestia was the goddess of the home. There was certainly religious overtones, but it was still sort of the secular people that would, the governmental, the Senate that would say, hey, there is a marriage and that has been approved. So when you're talking about appropriation of marriage, I'm not 100% sure that is actually true. Not to say that in sort of the later Christian history, yes, it was the priest doing the marriage and things like that. But what you've got to understand is that everybody at that time was religious, and the church took over a lot of different functions, kind of thing. Like it actually took a lot of functions from the sort of what in the past would be done by the government of Rome or of Greece or of these other things. But now we're getting to a place.
Really powerful.
And the problem with a state union and just calling it a state union is the way laws work. And I mean, it's not the problem with anybody. It's just the way that laws work. That if we have like 10,000 laws, or, you know, I think I'm over exaggerating, just say we have 1,000 laws that refer to people's rights under marriage, and then we put into a law state union. The problem then is we've got to go back and pass tons of laws that address a state union. That's the problem. Whereas if we just call it marriage, then all of the laws that refer to marriage then apply to the gay community who are getting married. This idea that we're going to use the word marriage was more out of convenience than actual, oh, we want to use this word. Because if we just put in state union, we would have one set of laws for marriage and nothing regarding state union.
Because
the easiest way
term uses marriage.
Because the legal term used is marriage. So the easiest way was just to basically say marriage and then have it all apply. But what I want to talk about, just briefly, is this idea that you're a sinner, because it seems like such a derogatory word. And my concern is that a lot of Christians, they have a lot of shame about the things that they've done wrong. And don't get me wrong, like, you know, you do something wrong, you probably ought to feel guilty about it. But there's a big difference between, and this is sort of coming from a psychology perspective, there's a big difference between feeling guilty for me having done something and the shame of being a bad person. Like, I've done plenty of things wrong. I'm not a bad person. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? And yeah, so it concerns absolutely. Me. I don't see shame as being useful in any way, in any capacity.
No, and it's not like we're all sinners, but we're not all bad people. Like, we're not all a murderer or someone who's plotting a rape or anything like that. Like, that's not, we can be sinners. And I know there is kind of a colloquialism or an association with when someone uses the word sinner, you think about negativity. And I really should say I'm a forgiven sinner because I do accept Jesus Christ. But I think people who might say, like, I a former coworker of mine, I had asked her, she is LGBT, and we were talking, and I had asked her about if she knew how many animals Noah brought on the ark, because she said that she didn't like the Bible because of the God of the Bible and what Jesus stood for and everything. And then she didn't know how many animals were brought on the ark. Not that I know all of the Bible, but I think, like, there are people who will judge the Bible without really kind of knowing the context. I'm still learning myself. I've gotten things wrong all the time. Try not to, less and less. I want to get things wrong less and less. But you can I think that people who maybe think they know who Jesus was or who the God of the Bible is, and they say, I deny that God. But I think God, the creator, I think knows their heart and says, God, I think the creator would know this person has a false idea of who the creator is or what Jesus did or what Jesus stood for. And the creator will say, if this person in their heart of hearts knows that person, that's why I will never condemn somebody, because I think if your most staunch, ears closed atheist heard what Jesus really stood for, I don't think any human could resist that, because it's something that resonates with everybody. So I do think that, like, you're a sinner, but I think, and I've left it out this discussion too, but, like, you're a sinner, but you've also had your sin forgiven. And so, like, the point about, like, acknowledging your sin is that you ideally you turn from it. Like, say, like, for men, pornography is a big one. And especially, like, you go through school, you're told, like, it's a good thing, it's healthy, it's natural. But, like, once you like recognize, hey, this is a human being with a soul, somebody's wife maybe, or this or that, sure, some people can keep going and keep doing it, but you feel it, you start to feel levels of kind of remorse, or, like, there, especially, like, in the adult entertainment industry, there's a lot of people who are trafficked and who are doing things against their will. And so you start to kind of maybe wonder about that and hope these people are okay. But if you can return to it, but as a forgiven sinner, someone who's had your sin forgiven, and you acknowledge it, you suddenly say like, wow, this doesn't really feel right. So you start to do it less and less. And I believe the Bible says it's like a dog returning to vomit. And so it's kind of like an acknowledgement causes you to want to do it less, or like, hey, I could go out to the bar and, say, hey, toots to a girl or something like that. But like then the next time you might be like, maybe that's not, the most respectful way to approach a woman. And so like it's kind of, I think, forgiveness, and that there are plenty of Christians who, no, like, no one's perfect. So you're forgiven, but I think what this forgiveness allows us is to kind of refine ourselves as we go forward. We're able to acknowledge more and more, how do you feel if you do something that is a sin? Like if you lie or cheat or steal, how do you feel about it? Could you have not lied? Could you have been honest and maybe had to go through something, but then ultimately you'll feel better? Do you have any remorse or guilt or anything like that from a lie you may or may not have told or have told in this situation? So I think it helps us refine, like, okay, next time I'm not going to lie, or maybe even, hey, I'm going to go apologize and tell someone I lied or I did this or that. Like, I think it helps us want to kind of stay on a path of treating people respectfully, and being unconditional lovers, like doing everything that is exemplified in unconditional love. So I think, I
Right.
know there's a negative connotation, but I think ultimately it's to help us kind of, bump up against the bumper on a, in a bowling lane. Like, it's to keep us on the lane, and sure, you can go over if you hop over the bumper and end up in the gutter, but you can always, come back and you're forgiven. Like, God still loves you no less because you sin,
Mm.
and just wants you to, like, to stay, to correct. Like, if you recognize it, can you correct it? And, can you always recognize it? That's another thing. But if you do, are you conscious of it? Can you do something to, better the situation? Maybe instead of, you know going to a strip club or something, instead you're like, I'm going to go to the park and play basketball or something like that. Like, you
Mm.
can make other choices to try to help. But if you don't have anything that says, like, maybe certain things aren't as beneficial, you might not ever be encouraged, or have a need to feel like, hey, I should, go do other things.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with the porn itself. I watch porn. I don't have a problem with it at all. I think that, you touched on a couple of things there, like people having bad experiences in the industry. People have had bad experiences in a lot of industries, and I think it needs more regulation and more protections for the people in it. I don't sort of say, hey, it's a perfect system. I think that it does need more regulation to protect people. You sort of pointed out where people have bad experiences, but I know of a lot of porn actresses that have had good experiences as well, and sort of say, hey, it was great while they did it, made a lot of money, and they don't regret it at all. I think there's a lot of stigma about it, which is really unfortunate. And they shouldn't get stigmatized for it, but that's this sort of idea that it's necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't agree with, and I don't feel any shame or guilt over that, because nobody has pointed out where I have harmed somebody. If that actress is being paid and she's happy to do it, and even if she's enjoying herself doing it, as some actresses have said, I don't feel guilt for that. I think that I would certainly say, hey, if somebody is having a bad time, don't do it. And what makes me sad is that a lot of women, it's their best career choice, because other careers are kind of, they don't get opportunities in other careers. That kind of makes me sad. But at the same time, there's men doing the same thing. There's male actors as well. So, you can't just say, hey, it's the women being disadvantaged in this.
And if there wasn't an audience, those women wouldn't make that kind of money. So there's,
Well, sure. but if they do want to, and it's not harming anybody, and there's regulations in order to protect the participants, I don't see where the harm is being done. And this is sort of what I need, is to be pointed out the harm that's being levied upon people.
Okay,
And so when
so
you
how
say,
about
well, just let me finish. And when
yep,
you sort
yep.
of say, hey, it doesn't feel right, I think it feels perfectly fine. I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. It may be that you have in your head that this is absolutely wrong, but I don't see sexuality and humans as being a wrong thing. It's perfectly fine. There's certain circumstances where you wouldn't want that sexuality, like to children and things like that. I get that. But, you know, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just normal adult feelings that you know, we sort of have. The way that you're talking about it, like a dog referred to own vomit, it's uncanny the way that I'm reminded of addictive behaviors. Now, this is where we get into separating the thing from the addiction. So, for instance, something like alcohol, when you brought it up before, when someone's drinking alcohol. So addiction is very, very misunderstood. And my mother was a psychologist. Her speciality was addiction. I'm very, very cognizant of these things. The substance itself, or whatever the behavior itself, is not the problem, right? That's not the problem. The problem is that that person has some kind of feelings or some kind of trauma or some kind of issue that they are using a substance to cope with. So when they take the substance, it basically negates those feelings that are really, really horrible to them, and it takes that away. The problem then comes that in order to alleviate that, they've got to keep going back to whatever it is that gave them that relief from the feeling, that coping mechanism. And there's
It
some
becomes the
coping
crutch.
mechanisms. Right, and there's coping mechanisms better than others. Like you said, go for a walk, or, you know, in my case, I was addicted to cigarettes, right? I'd started smoking early. Do not start smoking. It's absolutely horrible, addictive
Agreed.
as hell.
Don't smoke.
But
Smoking.
yeah, it kills people.
Yes.
But I sort of replaced that with drinking water. Every time that I felt like it, I would just drink some
Good for
water,
you, Mark,
kind
to
of thing.
kick that
And
addiction. Way to go.
well, that replaced it, kind of thing. So it's understanding how these things are working in our head. But the problem with shame is that when we say, "Hey, I'm this person that can't help going back to it," it's kind of like a prophecy. Like you're basically self-sabotaging yourself. You're saying, hey, I can't get over this thing and I'm going to go back to it. I don't, you know, sort of, so what you're describing is uncannily like the addictive process. And people are porn addicted. They absolutely are. They cannot stay away from it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It only is a problem when it is something that is interfering in your life. And it starts out by using it as a coping mechanism. So if someone is sort of sexually frustrated, for instance, they might use porn to alleviate those feelings. And then those feelings, having been alleviated, they will keep going back. But what we've got to do is separate the problem of why they're using it to cope with these feelings from the thing itself that they're using to cope with it. Because alcohol isn't a problem ordinarily. I mean, it does
Yes.
cause a few social problems, but it's when you're using that alcohol to drink and basically take those feelings away. And what you're doing is you're training yourself that when the feelings come up again, you drink, and that
Go
will
for the
solve your
bottle.
problem. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that can
I
happen with anything. You know, you can be addicted to all kinds of things, you know, like
Yeah, even
dopamine addiction.
exercise. You can be addicted to exercise, and
Well,
I feel
sure,
that you
yeah.
can overtrain. And that's
Mhm.
like I do think like absolutely if you I haven't had alcohol in a few years, but like whenever I would drink, I would, be happy, I'd feel good, I'd, want to, play beer pong or something, or, mess around and just have a good time. But then there are, someone next to me could be like angry and be getting more and more upset. And it is
Yeah.
it is to the person how they're affected if they are
Yes.
relying on it like a crutch. I mean, if you only drink once in a blue moon at a party or whatever, but then you
Mm.
do get angry, maybe you shouldn't drink or tone down, just so you don't, if you're aware that that's how you get and you don't want other to be perceived like that or anything, then you don't have to
No,
drink
no.
anymore.
This is the misunderstanding. If you do have a problem with alcohol, or anything, right? This is the whole thing about addiction. It's not about the addiction. You've got to address what's causing
Yes.
the feelings. Like, you've got to address the problems that are causing the feelings. So
Yes.
this is
Yeah.
where
If it's a crutch to
psychology,
you, you have to address it. Yes.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so it's when it's not the drinking that's the problem. It's the feelings of, you may have been traumatized as a child, or, like, so a lot of it with me was like, I'd been bullied as a child, and I felt very, very insecure and very, very, sort of, um, um, self-hating kind of thing, right? I didn't like who I was because I'd been told that I wasn't, I was a terrible person, or bullied and told I was a piece of crap,
Not.
basically, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
sort of the addiction doesn't come from the addiction. It comes from that problem that I felt bad about myself. And then when you do something like drinking, it takes away that feeling. You feel lighter and more jovial, and you forget about these sort of bad feelings.
Kind of
So
numbs you to it.
yeah, it sort of numbs you to it, and it sort of almost works. But the problem is that it's not sustainable. It only makes you feel better for a very short amount of time, and then you're back to needing it again to take
Yeah.
those feelings away.
It's good
And
times
that's,
on credit, basically. Like you get
yeah,
a little
yeah,
now, but you're
essentially,
paying more later. And that's like I
yeah,
do think like uh if you are kind of doing these things, and if you are someone who is struggling with a trauma or an addiction or anything, you should talk to your family, your friends, people you can
mm,
trust, and find somebody who will listen. I'm always willing to listen to somebody. If you don't know me, maybe talking to a stranger
oh,
could help.
sure,
You never, because they don't have any
yeah,
judgment or any context or anything. But people should definitely reach out, especially if you're ever feeling, please, anyone who is ever feeling down and feeling like they want to just end it, please reach out to me or somebody. Just talk to somebody, because the permanent situation, don't you can get over it. You're very capable. But I do think like if you have these things, you should work with others and work with yourself to get over it, to get over these things. If you do believe in a creator, you can pray to them and ask for more guidance. And I do think too that if you like if you know you have a problem with drinking and you go out and drink and you're like, oh, I did it again, like you don't have to feel shame. Like the creator knows you're trying. Even just being aware of it, the creator is going to know you're trying, is going to know that you're wanting to change. And maybe it can be slow to people can be slow to change. So it maybe as long as you make that slight steer, early on, you might not notice much change, but over time you'll start to go away from it. So like don't ever let like shame for any of these things or anything like that like get you down either, because those are things that as long as you're trying and conscious, like I think that type of thing is the creator that I worship, I think recognizes that the situation we're in, the world we're in, and everything, and what people are going through. People have a lot on their mind, and are going through a lot of very difficult things. And um, I would say that an all-knowing creator knows everything about your situation, everything about the people's situations who might be affecting your situation, all the circumstances. And so the creator knows very well what you're going through. And I think like when people say like they want to be like a God or anything like that, like I don't think it would be difficult to be the creator, because say I hate this example, but like if someone commits suicide, the creator knows everything and more about what that person was feeling that did it. Plus, now that person is gone from this earth, and the family and friends that are left behind, the creator knows all of their sad feelings and what they're going
mm,
through. And so the creator would actually have a more total level of sadness, the Bible says the creator weeps when these types of things happen. And so I think, and that's part of why I think regardless of what our beliefs are, we really need to do what we can to get people in a good mood, in a good state of mind, so then we can have these discussions. You and I agree on much, disagree on
yeah,
much, I'm
I think we
sure.
do,
And
yeah,
so, but we're
yeah,
able to talk, we're able to have a conversation. And that's something that a lot of people can't do or won't do with certain groups or this or that. And I think that's a big thing, is being polite. And that's why I was so like happy to be on your show is because you are, you've always been very kind. And that's something that regardless of anyone's views on any topic, being polite to me means people are, that's where like intelligence is to me. Like I'm not that smart. I'm learning, but I'm not the smartest. But I think that is people who are wise, are people that know how to keep the peace in situations where people could get tense. And I like, not to say that you can't get passionate in a debate or anything like that, but like to be able to know, okay, we're just talking about a topic. You're not actually wanting to be malicious towards somebody else. That to me is so big, because there are people who, whatever, they might put on some facade or whatever, but then when they're by themselves, they might really harbor darkness towards others, and that can be where problems can arise. And I think that's why having like these discussions about, if someone knew that there was a creator, would they do the same things that they do? Or if they suddenly thought that there was no creator, would their behavior change? Like, if the Bible was shown false to me, I mean, I would probably drink a little more. I'm kind of waiting to drink, and I don't think there's a problem like if you drink for celebration or anything like that. But like, there are things about me that would change a little bit. But the part of me about like caring for people and wanting to try to always better my morals and my ability to listen to others and communicate with others is something that I will always strive for, regardless of belief. And really wanting to get people to understand it does not make any sense to me that you and I can have these discussions. We're on the other side of the world from one another. We're able to talk, but world leaders can't do that. And their idea to solutions is go attack people who you're telling strangers you don't know that you're the commander over, to go attack other people who don't influence their government, who they don't have. It's strangers attacking strangers because strangers tell strangers to go do things. We don't need that in this time. In this time we live in, our technology is so, our communications network is so well together that we could talk through things. And that's where I think like not wanting, even if you disagree, doesn't mean there needs to be conflict. Like you can do things
So
cordially. So
I want to help you understand where some of my my sort of atheist brethren and sisterin are coming from, where we're coming from, because there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding going out. And on the subject of help, and I really recommend that if you are having problems, you speak to a psychologist or psychiatrist, somebody in the mental health field. Our progress of the understanding of the human mind has grown so much over the years. Like we do not just sort of call people crazy for having addictions anymore. They're not. They're perfectly fine. They just have a problem because something is causing them to go back to a substance in order to alleviate feelings about a problem. And we all have issues from our past that we could probably work on. Psychology is not sort of a, well, I go there, I'm fixed, I'm done kind of thing. It's kind of an ongoing process of understanding your own mind and why your behaviors are the way that they are, why you react in certain ways, why you, sort of do certain things. And I mean, I sort of, my mother was a psychologist. I've been to a lot of therapy. I've studied a lot about psychology, and I still have behaviors that I do that I know are caused by trauma when I was younger, kind of thing. So traumatic experiences, and then if I think someone's picking on me, I kind of react badly, even though they might not be. So I know these things are there, and my behavior still follows it. And we understand this about humans. So I wanted to sort of, but I don't take issue. I understand why you say it, but I think that calling it there's this darkness in the people that attack you, I don't think that's the case, and I'll explain why. Because every time, and the one fundamental thing that I have learned about myself, because it might surprise you to know this, but I used to be a very, very angry person when I was like 20, in my 20s, like just just very, very quick to anger, quick to rage, just got incredibly angry. Really, really angry young man who hated everything and sort of lashed out at people all the time. So this is something my mother told me that I hate it that she was right after all these years when I finally understood it, that there is no such thing as. Yeah, I know, but having a psychologist for a mother is particularly frustrating. There's no such thing as anger. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing at all. Anger, frustration, that kind of thing, that stressful feeling, that's not a real feeling. So the one thing I learned, anger is caused by either fear or pain, right? So fear or pain are the major triggers for anger. And anger is sort of this secondary response. It's not an emotion itself. It's tied to the flight or fight response. So in all animals, you threaten them and they will either, fight, flight, or freeze in humans. They will either fight and protect themselves. They'll either run away or they will freeze and basically go completely rigid and not move to, hopefully they'll be left alone. It's the same thing that's causing this, and that's the fear response. The fear or pain response causing them to either, pump adrenaline so they can run or pump adrenaline so they can fight. So anger's kind of that pumping adrenaline so you can fight. But in today's age, without a physical source, all we do is we get angry, right? We get this adrenaline flowing and we get really angry. So the good question to ask yourself when you see atheists get angry is what are they afraid of? What's making them afraid? And a lot of the time it is that they've come from a background of being in a religion, and they're afraid of sort of being having them people tell them that they're going to hell, or that their creator's going to punish them, or that they're wrong and need to believe this. Or the worst one, which I get sort of miffed about, is people saying you do believe and telling them what they should to believe. And so, or that they do already and they don't, they're having their autonomy to say this is what I believe taken away from them, which of course, being bullied, taking away my autonomy makes me, when I say makes me angry, I'm basically saying it makes me scared. It causes that adrenaline to flow. So when people sort of tell me you actually do believe in God, it makes me like, how dare you? Because that taking away of sort of trying to tell me what I believe and what's going on in my head, when I've been told in my youth that I'm a terrible person, I think this and I think that, and I'm gay when I'm not. That's a big thing for me. So that anger is usually going to be tied to them actually sort of, and it's not necessarily fear of you or a fear of God or anything like that. It's a fear of being pushed back down into a place that they don't want to be. So
not allowing your agency and free will to be expressed.
Right, or not allowing you to believe what you want to believe, and don't get me wrong, sometimes that is not justified kind of thing. Like, I know if you say, hey, you should believe in God, I'm like, oh, okay, sure, it doesn't worry me in the slightest, it doesn't worry me. But somebody that's had parents say, really strict parents who have hit them and said you have to believe in God, you could imagine the fear that would bring up if somebody said you have to believe in God kind of thing. So a lot of that anger is to do with the fears that we have in life. And so they may not be technically angry about things, and they may be working. And that's not everybody, of course. That's not everybody. It's just something that I have noticed with people who have deconverted from religion. When they get told what to believe because of their experiences, they react a lot more negatively than me, who just was raised in a secular household. I was never told to believe in a God. I was never, sort of indoctrinated. I don't mean that as a bad word. It just means they're imparting of doctrine on somebody. I was never indoctrinated into any religion, so it doesn't bother me in the slightest. but you start telling me what I think and what I believe, and then we're going to have a problem, because I really don't like that, and that's something I've got to work on. As I said, your sort of mental states and the idea of psychology is an ongoing process. There's no end goal to it, right? There's no like, oh well, I'm completely perfect now. I understand everything about
We're
psychology.
always developing.
Right, we're always developing, we're always learning. It's the person that says, no, I know all I need to know, that will never progress and stops where they are. And I think that's a good segue, because I think that a problem I have with religion is sort of when they say, when we say, hey, how did this happen, and it's like, well God did it. I guess my problem with that is, it doesn't really explain anything to me, and it sort of puts a stop on investigating. Like if God created the world, then the idea that we can never understand it and we should just stop looking for the reason. I don't know. I have a problem with that, I guess. I would rather keep looking than sort of say, hey, a God did it, and stop there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So, do you mind if can I quickly kind of
Oh
try to
yeah,
touch on
absolutely,
those points, and then
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I do think, I do want to apologize. I do think, hearing what you're saying, I don't know if I had a thought run through my head that it could have maybe be interpreted, but like when I said like God knows what's on people's hearts, and if they really knew Jesus's message, I don't think people could deny it. I don't want to take away your agency. I know you believe what you
Oh
believe.
no, I wasn't referring to you, Nathan.
Okay,
at all.
I just like I do
let
feel
that-
God, the creator that I worship will judge people's hearts. He knows what people believe, what they genuinely believe. But then I also think like when you had mentioned like what are people afraid of and how fear is secondary, and I think about it sometimes. Like I've dealt with some
No,
people who,
that's primary. Anger's secondary.
yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I have had like as far as like being angry, I've thought about it sometimes because I've dealt with some people who have not been the nicest, and so like but I don't get angry at them. But like I do, like I've thought about it. I don't know if human beings could make me angry, but I know when I think about certain things, like the military industrial complex is a big one. That
Sure.
entity does make me angry. And then I was thinking about it as you were saying it, like the anger is about fear for the well-being
Yeah.
of my fellow man. Like I don't want
Sure.
people to
Yeah.
be hurt, and so I think that
Yep.
is spot on. And then even recognizing too, like you had said, like maybe it's not always warranted. Like, oh, I have this feeling of anger, or and it's caused from a fear, but maybe it's not entirely rational. I think that is valid as
Mhm.
well. So like I agree, like always, even when we debate, like I agree a lot with what you say. And so um I do, and so like now I think that's most of the points I wanted to get at. But then like I do agree, like if we are talking about um like a creator saying, okay, God did it. Okay.
Mm.
I do agree that you shouldn't, when we are trying to understand how God did it, which maybe could be a question for causing us to want to prod further and keep progressing, is okay, we learned this. How did God do it? Let's look at the mechanisms and try to understand. I think there is a way where you can use it to pilot yourself going forward, rather than saying God did it, let's stop there, because I don't think
Right.
that would hinder progress. And so
Yeah.
maybe you could say, if I could just ask, and then I'll get back to answering it, but does it maybe not so much in what it can explain, but like logically, from a philosophical premise, does it make sense to say a creator that is all capable could create? That's
Oh
logically
yeah.
true, right?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, there's no problem logically. I'm just quite. We're going to probably wrap up in about 5 minutes, by the way, people. So if you do have any questions, do tag me on them. Super chats will be read first, but I'm happy to take all your questions. It's just an hour and a half is the maximum we can go. So just giving you all a heads up. Yeah, I think in philosophy there's nothing like, so if you're talking about sort of a syllogism wise, a God that's all powerful powerful is perfectly valid in a logical sense.
Okay.
The question is whether that is sound rather than just valid kind
Yeah.
of thing. So
Can it
does
help
it?
us progress scientifically,
Well, no,
or
that's not.
technology
Yeah,
and
that's not the question. I
societally?
mean, there's a lot of Christians doing really good scientific stuff. It sort of I often mention BioLogos, that is a scientific agency that's run by Christian, and they do fantastic work. Like, there is nothing bad about what they are doing. I completely disagree on their origin as God, but they're still very good scientists that explain things really well. I highly recommend them. So there's no problem with that, really. It's just the question becomes, do I have good evidence that this is actually the case? Because if you think about it, and I don't want to be rude or insulting, but if you sort of think about it, that anything all powerful, whether it be a god or a spirit of some sort, or just about anything all powerful, is a valid just logically, for the creation of everything. That anything all powerful could have caused that.
Yeah. And that, so like so the logical framework is there. And now, like, you could say, okay, a creator
Mhm.
made everything. Now, how did he make a tree? Where did this tree
Well,
come from?
no. Oh, you mean from your perspective? Okay,
Yeah,
so
like I'm
yeah,
saying,
yeah,
to
yeah.
like allow you to look further, you would say, okay, this tree
Mhm.
had to come from somewhere. Where did it come from? Well, it came from a seed, and this seed was
Yeah.
put in the dirt and got water and sunlight, and eventually a tree popped up. And so,
Yes.
like, there is a way to look, and I think that is something that God wants us to do, is to understand, have an understanding of the world, so we can make better things, improve technology, improve society, and do these things. Like, the
Mm.
ability to communicate and like FaceTime, is incredible technology,
Sure.
information theory and everything, so mind-boggling. But like, I do think that, okay, say in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, so that's the
Mhm.
explanation. And then, so that now you look into the mechanisms of, like, if God said that he spoke, well, what thoughts could that generate? If there was sound and light, okay, well, if sound is frequencies and light has frequencies, maybe if you have these long wavelengths, and as you compress them, maybe it's like a theory of like hard light, where light becomes so high frequency that it actually becomes like a solid. And so you could get into exploring it, what is the validity to that or anything, because and you also have things like sonoluminescence is sound that you send through water and it creates light. And so you have like connections with these things. And so, like, I think, and then this is what, like, it is, to allow different views, different worldviews, I think is important, because it gives us different angles. If you're an evolutionist and you're looking at it from a certain way, and someone is a creationist and they're looking at it from a certain way, you're going to make
Mhm.
different predictions. You're going to have different hypotheses. You're going to run experiments that can be repeated by others, to get the same results, and your conclusions will be the same. And then it's how you interpret the data. What questions can you ask from there that allow you to set up more experiments, or to prod further into your scientific inquiry? But I do think, like, I do agree with you that people should not full stop and say God did it, I'm done,
Yeah.
I don't need to go further. Like, I think uh, our creator wants us to dive deeper into things, and what can we really learn about, um like, I'm in school for nutrition, and one of the big
Mhm.
things that I do is show people an angiogram of disease reversal. um it's and so, like, we see this picture here of heart disease being reversed. Like, you have narrow arteries here
Mhm.
on the A side, and then this B
Yep.
side here is completely widened arteries. That's someone who had late stage heart disease. They reversed it. They systemically widened their arteries, lowered their blood pressure, lowered their cholesterol. So now we look into the mechanisms. Like, I think our creator wants us to. Why is it that eating plant foods exclusively vegan is the only way so far shown to do this. And then you can get into like, well, that would lead to the question, what is in plants versus what is in animals, and where is the difference? And how does this affect our body, so we can set up, the radial artery tourniquet test, and you can see how
Yeah.
blood pressure is affected. So I do agree. I think we would both agree, whether you are an atheist or a theist, you should never stop learning, never stop questioning, never stop trying to figure things out. Tinkering with things is a great thing, trying to engineer things. My roommate is really good at just figuring out on the fly how to fix things, or jerry rig things. And like, I think those types
Mhm.
of things are incredible to be able to do. And to be able to ask questions and discuss with people who disagree with you, so that you can,
Yeah.
people, we're helping each other find strengths and weaknesses. Ultimately,
Mm.
hopefully, through doing so and strengthening our weaknesses, it's kind of like we lift up everybody. If you're, like you had mentioned, if you're that selfish person, but you're doing something that, maybe your motive is to only help yourself, but you're also lifting up others, because you're a selfish kid, but your parents, or you're 25 years old and you're really selfish, but your
Yeah.
parents see that you look happy in what you're doing, you're making them happier, so you're actually increasing their quality of life. And so, like, I think helping
Sure.
helping carry each other's weaknesses and lifting each other's strengths helps lift everything up,
Mm.
so that we are all, ultimately going towards a better world.
Yeah, and I don't think we disagree with that on all. I just disagree. The only thing I disagree with is just the link to God, and that's it. So I don't think we need to agree to live in a good world where we're both doing our best to make the world a better place. Because if that's the end goal, I don't really care why you're doing it, and I don't think you should care why I'm doing it. Just that our sort of what we want aligns. It's just that I don't agree. It is an hour and a half. I've only got one question through, so I'll just quickly ask it, and then we can get you out of here so you're not late. So Mark, Reid, and Nathan and Mark, any good evidence for a God more than testimonials and text? What do you think, Nathan?
So evidence for God, I will never, I can't. I will admit to you that I can never give you evidence for God. You can only accept God on faith, and how much agency you allow that faith to give you, or the God that you choose to give that faith to, I think is on you. I do think that it's important to have faith in a creator personally, because I want to love my creator to the best that I can and be the best person that I can. So I have to extend that to the humanity that I am around, because if I love God but I'm being snide to another person, then I'm not showing love to that person who is also loved by God, which would, my God would say that, that would make them sad. So I can never give evidence. I can give you kind of logical reasoning or philosophical testimonies, or things that I would say back a God versus like a naturalistic explanation. And I want to say it again, but like, I don't think anyone is a bad person for not believing in God. There are good people who don't, and there are bad people who do. So, but I can't actually give evidence, and I really, I hope that isn't like a fault to my position or what I'm saying, but I can't provide evidence for, in the natural world, for a
Mm.
supernatural creator. I'm not that able. So
Yeah, and I think I'd agree with you. I do hear arguments, sort of logical arguments, and I do hear arguments against sort of naturalistic things, but just arguing against naturalistic things isn't evidence for a God. So it's kind of
yeah,
like disproving one explanation doesn't prove another, if that makes sense. It's just from that point, you've got to have evidence for it. So I would definitely agree that there is just testimonials and the text and texts, I might add, from multiple different gods that are all contradictory to one another, so they can't all be correct. But yeah, so I think we do agree on that. I don't think that faith is a very it depends how you're using faith. Can you give me a quick definition of how you're using faith there?
Yeah, so like if you like a trust, maybe in an unseen, or
Okay, so the biblical,
yeah, or
yeah,
extended to like I'm gonna trust that you and I, if we were in person, we would get along, and not that you would like, or I don't like to use other people, but like I would trust that you're not gonna think, if we ever hung out in person, that I would suddenly be like, oh well, now I'm gonna want to box or something like that. Like
right. But
so
see, the
like
thing
trusting
is,
your fellow man, that scientists are
right,
not lying with data or whatever, would be like another trust. So or faith
okay.
that
Yeah,
um
because I wouldn't use faith for that, the trust in things unseen, because if I didn't know you at all, I wouldn't have that trust necessarily. It's just I have evidence sort of that tends to show that, for me talking to you here, that's evidence that you wouldn't do anything like that, because I can sort of at least evaluate whether you are a good person or not. So I don't really see faith as a good reason to make any sort of. I don't think it's very reliable. Like I don't have faith in my wife. I have a lot of evidence that she loves me, and if that evidence changes, I can say, hey, that's, if she cheats
could
on me, I can go, hey, I shouldn't trust her.
could you couple that evidence for your wife loving you, which very excellent, by the way, to have a wife. But do you think that you could, without necessarily hindering yourself, do you think that it's coherent to have evidence that also could be coupled with faith? Like you do have
Um,
faith that she's yours, and that you two have an unbreakable love.
Um, yeah, I think that sort of giving people, say, benefit of the doubt and stuff is fine, but I probably would go with as much evidence and evidence based and less emotional, sort of standing on things that are important. It's just that, you know, I've got an overwhelming amount of evidence that she loves me, like 20 something years worth of evidence. It's, like we really do have that relationship. But if that evidence should change, if she started to be really mean and, hung around with other guys and, snubbed me off or whatever, that I still wouldn't have faith at that point. It would be like, well, this is the evidence that something has changed. So, like I think you're sort of using evidence like a leap that is backed up by evidence, kind of thing, that it factors into what you're talking about. Um, so I'm not sure, but I really should get you out of there. It's coming up to an hour and 40 minutes,
Yeah,
so
I
I'm
mean, I
really
still have I got a little bit more time. So
okay.
like I like another 10-20 minutes. I mean, is
Okay,
cool with me.
well,
But yeah, if
just
you
tell
want
me when
to.
you need to go, and we'll wrap up. I really don't want to, keep you or get you late or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Um,
Because yeah, I do think like maybe when you do have evidence, if you have faith in something, you can have full on faith. And then
mm,
as the evidence, I do think that, and I think it's just intellectually honest that if evidence is presented that contradicts your faith, it's kind of like a scientific hypothesis in that sense, where you either need to readjust your faith, or
mm,
it can diminish, it can go away, you can lose faith in things. I do think that is certainly it's pliable. Like it's something that can be
okay.
strengthened, be taken away, depending on your life experiences, um, or what you're experiencing, and so I think it can change. Like I've changed my views on things before, plenty of times, and on many different things, and I'm always trying to refine be as accurate as I can in my assessments and in how I see things,
Yeah.
the evidence I've seen, how I'm able to rationalize things. So, um, but I do think like having, I'm trying to think kind of how, if that is a parallel example of like your wife, you have evidence for your wife that could
Mm.
match, if you chose to say, if you chose to have faith to match that evidence in your wife. Even if I had faith in the creator, which I do, I still would
Mhm.
not be able to provide evidence. I can only, and I think
Yeah.
this is a big distinction. I cannot provide evidence. I can provide inference. Um, I can look at the complexity of life, the problems that there are in the origin of life fields right now in terms of getting from chemicals to life. Is there is a big gap in that field. They can get,
There is a
parts and
gap.
stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so like I do think that there are inferences, like life is really special. I think the emotion, I think how much, happiness we can feel around one another. um it can be inferred through an evolutionary lens, or a naturalistic lens or anything like that. But I think it can also be
Sure.
inferred that these are things from on high that are special. Like when you experience a special moment, like right now, I live with my room, my he's one of my best friends, and like I
Mhm.
love living here, and it's something that like every day I look at this roof that he put over my head, and I'm just like I'm so blessed, and I really feel it. And so it's an inference to me of like this is the good in life that I really want, other everybody to experience, their good, what their good is. um and
Sure.
their good is different from my good. And so I think that
Yeah.
those those are inferences, but I again, like I can't supply evidence. I don't have a
Mhm.
machine that you can step on and it will show me a picture of your soul or weigh your soul or measure the dimensions, the volume of your soul. I don't have that technology. Anyone who claims to, I'd probably be skeptical and want to ask them a few questions. So, um yeah, I know there are people who will say like this is proof of God or this is evidence of God, but I do think having faith, we have to have, I have to have faith that Jesus rose from the dead, and defeated death. It's actually kind of
Why?
an what's that?
Why do you have to have faith in that?
Because the Bible is, that's the like the bottleneck of the Bible is Jesus raising from the dead. In the Bible, it does say, if you don't have faith that Jesus rose from the dead, that your faith is essentially void. Like there's no point in having faith if you don't believe that Jesus rose. And so I do believe that. It's not something that I can prove. I mean, the empty tomb, is there are things that can infer it, but you could say, well, what if someone robbed this grave, robbed the tomb or anything like that? You could explain things, this or that. It's a faith. And I think that faith is in a spiritual
Well,
aspect.
I guess what I'm asking is like if you have these good feelings about your roommate, and I completely understand, so sounds like a great guy, and you
Yeah.
have these good feelings about things, and you sort of said your life wouldn't be much different as far as the way you treated people or the life that you would live. I'm just wondering why you have to have faith at all. Like if you're just going to feel the same way and do the same things, that just doesn't make sense to me.
So my outlook on certain events is different because of my faith. Like, for example, in the last couple years, both of my grandmas have passed away.
I'm so
And
sorry.
it's there I they were in a lot of pain. Thank you very much.
Mm,
But they were in some pain.
yeah.
And so my faith allows me to really feel that they are in a better place, that they are taken care of. Their
Okay.
memories will live on, and I really am grateful for the what how they raised me,
Okay.
So I think that there is faith in the afterlife and in more to this world that
Yeah.
I think like the way I look at it because of my faith is right now I'm trying to uplift my own like soul. I want to be the best me so that in the in the afterlife in heaven I'm at the highest possible starting point for when I go to heaven, because I want to be as sincere as possible, um so I think that that is
Okay.
kind of it's kind of where my I think how my faith like I when
Okay.
my grandma's passed away I cried a couple times but not I've actually I've never been atheist. I've always believed in God. My faith has gotten
Mm.
stronger in the last 10 years. But like I can't imagine if I wasn't younger, not just due to immature like being less mature, but also my lesser understanding of the spirit. I probably would have cried a lot more than I did. Whereas now, when someone passes away, I do feel sad and I miss them dearly. But I'm
Mm.
also I celebrate them as opposed to um what's the word? Mourn. I celebrate as opposed to mourning somebody. Um I feel that they're in a better place, especially if they're in pain. I feel they have a better quality. Their soul is in a
Mhm.
better place, and I try to also um around my family when I see my family members are crying, I try to comfort them and say like, whereas I might have been crying myself, I'm now trying to say, hey, she's in a better place, and the pain has left her and she's with her family that she's been missing for years. Like my grandma got to be with my grandpa again, and my other grandma got to be with her brother, and so they're in a better place. They're probably playing cards or something right now, and so it's something that like I want to like let's celebrate all she did for us, and
Well,
how
you
she.
can do that without God. You can celebrate somebody's life without God.
Yeah,
Right, there's no
you
problem
can,
with that.
yes.
I don't know about the playing cards, but certainly from an atheistic standpoint, I've when my mother died, I thought, like it's actually at least she won't feel the pain that she was in up until the point that she died. Like it was kind of a relief in a way, and that's okay. That's okay. You'll have mixed feelings in these cases, but that's getting a bit morbid. So I might move on,
Yeah, definitely.
because sort of
um,
but I get what you're saying. I guess I want to reframe this question. Do you see yourself as a fundamentalist first off? So do you see yourself as a fundamentalist?
yeah, in like the terms of like biblical literalism, like I do consider myself a literalist, fundamentalist. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Yeah. So why? Why would you?
Um
Why would you sort of take a fundamental? I guess why would you take a literal reading of the Bible?
so the Bible is a lot of things. It's a history. If you take it literal, it's an account of creation of origin of cosmology, origin of life. It's got history of a group of people. There are claims in it that are scientific. There's some poetry, there's some metaphor, some prophecy. There's a lot of things in the Bible, and so when I look at the things that are in the Bible, that can be like ethics or whatever you could say is subjective, and so what we feel is right is what we're going to go with is right as a society. But there are claims that you can test, that would,
Okay.
if the Bible is perfect, then there can't be any error. And so like testable claims that the Bible can make that are scientific are in there, and like for example, like cleaning your hands with running water, that is
Hmm.
something that is shown to be true, so
Yeah.
that would be an evidence that the Bible is right scientifically in this regard, not a falsification of the Bible. So then you also have like our original food in the Bible is plants, and right now plant exclusive vegan eating is the only way. Like whole food vegan eating is the only way shown to reverse heart disease. It can prevent things like heart disease, diabetes, and reversal is a step above prevention. So that kind of I think would also check out with the Bible that it is accurate, and even like with the earth, we don't, if you're sitting, you don't feel motion. And so when the Bible says that the earth doesn't move, it's something that we feel. Even like there are plenty of physicists and astronomers and everything throughout history who have said like we can't feel the earth moving even though it is. So they're kind of saying like it matches with the Bible, even if we could measure it but we can't feel it. Like they're saying we can't. So
that's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, that'll
have like, I think we could do hours on that one as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So that's why the scientific validation allows me to say, okay, the faith, I can have faith in these other things because scientifically it checks out. So
that
I feel
ties well into this. Does Nathan believe that the flat earth is based on evidence or faith? And I think that's a really good question. So is that one of the faith-based things, or is that an evidence-based belief?
So yeah, I don't believe the earth is flat. I know empirically that the earth is flat based on the scientific evidence, based on empirical demonstration of the natural world and our recreations of observations in the natural world in a scaled, controlled environment. I used to believe the earth was a globe, or back then I would say I knew the earth was a globe. I loved astronomy, high school, college, took it, got high A's every time. But just as I knew the earth was a ball, like, oh, I'm on a spheroid, I now know the earth is flat in that same level that if you are someone who knows the earth is a globe, it's the same level of knowledge using evidence. There's no belief. I wouldn't say I believe the earth is flat like you wouldn't say you believe the earth is a globe. It would be it's a knowledge claim.
Okay. Nathan, if your religion is personal, why evangelize? Do you evangelize for a start? I think there's an assumption in there that
so I don't really evangelize. I've been through, especially with the earth topic, like with my family and friends, I've gone through kind of some things on my own causing. I've been through some things. But so I do try to be respectful. I won't like, I've had friends who will say like we would be hanging out and they'd be like, oh, you're so, you just said something so stupid. If you keep talking like that, people think the earth is flat. And they kind of like throw it my way as they look at me as they say it. And then I'll defend my beliefs if they're poked at kind of without reason or anything. Like I'm not just gonna roll over and take an insult, but I do try to keep it personal, but I'm also willing to embrace, like I put content out there and I talk with people in comments and everything and go on. Like I'm on Mark's show, I'll debate. I'm willing to discuss these things and be criticized. Hopefully to get a better understanding of what is true, to refine my position, to learn other things. And so I will share my view, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to condemn somebody for, you don't believe exactly what I believe. And so you're wrong. And like, I don't think that is right or fair to do. But I will defend my faith. I can't quote scripture, but I can look it up. I can look up scripture and I can get the context and I can talk like that in those lines of reasoning. And so I can do that. But I think there's kind of a time and place for it. But I also know like there are people who think they know what Jesus taught. And so I can't just go up to them and say, Jesus loves you, you need to accept him. Like some people will reject that. But if you can show someone the Lil Nas X is a person who sold shoes, 666 shoes that had a drop of blood and have Bible verses about the devil and pentagrams, and then his music video for it is satanic. And if I can show them like the darkness in the world, maybe then they're going to say, well, Washington D.C. has a pentagram in the streets, and there were Freemasons that said that. You can get into that stuff, and then people, you can either start with Jesus or end with Jesus, I guess. And I don't start with Jesus, which is I think what evangelism is. I could, and would be willing to if someone wanted to, but I'm not trying to turn someone away, because to someone, to a few people, if you go up to them and say Jesus loves you, their ears are already closed. They say another person pumping Jesus and trying to Bible thump, and that to me is
Yeah,
not
that's
effective in
real
trying to get a
preaching. Yeah,
conversation. So
that's probably what I'd see as evangelizing is that there's that preaching kind of thing. So yeah, that's not applicable to you. We have a super chat from Bruce for Higginsworth. Marker is a beast, a civil beast. Thank you so much for $2 American, I think. Melissa, you did send in something else, but it's not actually a question. It's more of a statement. Jews don't believe that Genesis is literal. Jesus was a Jew. Nathan's. I don't think that's a question, and I don't think all Jews think the same. So they do believe that Jesus wasn't the Messiah, but I don't know about whether they all believe that it's literal. So don't worry about that. I just thought I'd point it out.
okay.
And I'll just take one more question, Nathan. Why do astronomers accept evidence for a flat Earth? Why do no astronomers accept your evidence for a flat Earth? They're examining the exact same evidence as you.
Like astronomers, people working at NASA or anything like that, or other space agencies, people that are collecting this data, if you get data from a computer program or anything, or you get data from higher up, and you're interpreting that, you're running calculations, getting this type of, running these things, that stuff, I believe, like, the math is all there, that stuff is all real. People are very real, very genuine, very sincere in what they're doing. It's just that right now there are people who are taught a certain way, and for some people it can be hard to consider alternative ways of interpreting. And so, like, one of the things is like the Michelson-Morley experiment, which is said to automatically be a null for the ether, and that it factually disproved the ether. But what you have to look at is, when you look at the Michelson-Morley, you get this slight fringe shift, and that was the data, that was the result. Now it's how you interpret the result. You can say that it nullifies the ether. You can also say that it shows that the Earth isn't moving at the rate that it would. So it's how we interpret evidence. I think a lot of, if you get
Well,
complicated math,
I think a lot of the time astronomers get their own data. Like, they'll be using telescopes and things like that. Like that's their job, to collect all of that data. So
Mhm.
I'm not sure how that would work.
So yeah, so if you're looking at, like, if we look at a star in the sky, like, we see light.
Yeah.
The only information that we get is light going through our atmosphere, and that's kind of it. And then it's how do you interpret it? Because, like, in terms of the distance to the stars, for example, that's kind of an assumption. Like, we had to assume how far away Venus was and its size to be able to then triangulate and assume the size and distance of the sun. The sun's distance has changed. Stars' distances have changed. Polaris recently went from like 430 to 340 light years away. So, like, even in global cosmology, there is they're still trying to figure certain things out. But I think too
Sure.
that like, if we get we make, no matter what, you can't deny that, like, if you're looking at, but you can't deny Sirius, the star we call Sirius is the brightest point of light in the sky. Like, that's just, that's what it is, that's what we observe. As to how far away it is an interpretation. Like, the astronomers, they can go out with a telescope, they can image stack, they can do this or that. But, like, I've recorded and I can see stars twinkle with my own eye, but then an astronomer will show me Sirius looking like a big blue ball. And so that doesn't flicker. So how can you,
Yeah.
if zooming makes something bigger, you're zooming in on something, you should be zooming in on something that's flickering. So how is it that it goes from this flickering thing, which I've recorded with a zoom camera, and I can see it with my own eyes, I can see color change. So now, how is it, what is happening where now it's suddenly a solid blue, no flicker, because it's going through our atmosphere. You're not using a telescope on the ground that is outside of our atmosphere. There are actually a couple questions about the globe cosmology, about like if our
Mm.
atmosphere scatters all light so that our sky is blue because that's the only wavelength left that we are able to see, then why doesn't everything coming through our atmosphere look blue, like the sun or the moon or stars? Why wouldn't they all have their light colors filtered except for blue? Um, or like the eclipse has, the lunar eclipse is red, but the last color that we see before it gets dark is actually blue. So there, if it's the very edge light, it would be blue, and then scattered blue. So there are things. There are people who make honest observations. um, they collect data, and maybe it's a transform. Maybe they're going through a Lorentz transform equation, matter contraction, like with the Michelson-Morley. And I think there are some problems there as well. But I do think it's, people will go through, they have a set of formulas that they follow mathematically. And I agree that those astronomers, they're smart, they're mathematically gifted, they're plugging things in and it's accurate. They're accurately doing those equations. I think math though doesn't always. Right now, math can do a lot, but is also right now currently like a very big framework, as opposed to like science observation, what we can actually deduce from what we're seeing. Um, like math
Well, I
doesn't
mean, we
always
could
apply.
have a conversation again on this, the scientific method, how it's applied to math and what math is, kind of thing. Um, so we could have an entire conversation about that, and stars and why they flicker, and why when you zoom in they get sort of move into clouds, kind of thing. But I think we're really out of time.
Yeah,
And I'm
thank you,
sorry,
Mark.
Priya.
For yeah, no, this time worked really well. So I hope I hope I answered that at least somewhat. Feel free to reach out to me, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk more to anyone who
Yeah, well, I'd
wants
love to
to
have you
ask more
back
about.
on, Nathan, and address some of these things. Talk about
Yeah,
what's happening with the
it'd be
stars,
my
and why
pleasure.
we're sort of making the inferences that we are. That would be fantastic. So keep in touch. I'm certainly on email, and I want to thank you so much for joining me. It's been a really good conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you for taking all of those questions. Yeah, I really appreciate it, Nathan. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, agreed. And yeah, Mark, you're always nice to me, and so I'm happy to get this opportunity to chat and kind of field what I can, and hopefully at least cause some. All I want, I just like to encourage like thought and give people other perspectives and stuff. And so, Mark, I really want to thank you for the opportunity and
No
for
problem.
um the, the progressive conversation. And
No
yeah, please,
problem at
hey,
all.
do you mind? Can
Um,
I just say like two more
just one
things?
thing, I missed a super chat, and that's really
Oh yeah, yeah.
important because, like, yeah. So Bruce for Higginsworth again said for $2, YEC Death Before Sin, did a Venus flytrap evolve?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yep.
yeah, young Earth creation. Yeah, I do believe that the Earth is young in terms of, not billions of years old, but a few thousand years old. Death before sin. So that's actually a big difference between biblical worldview and evolution worldview. Is the Bible says that man brought death into the world, whereas evolution says that death brought man into the world. So maybe death is something that pioneers better genes, which we can, that could get into Hitler. I won't say that, but like, well, I won't say any
Mhm.
more to that, but that could open up a big conversation
Yeah, big
about like,
conversation, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
superior genes and everything. But and then yeah, Venus flytrap after the fall,
Mhm.
and then after the flood again. There are two big. The evolution uses, unless you're punctuated equilibrium evolutionist, gradualism or uniformitarianism is an evolution
Mhm.
worldview, with maybe some minor catastrophism. But then the Bible has two catastrophic events, which cause big change. That would be the fall, and then that would also be the
Blood.
flood. And so, yes, you do have, just like how roses got thorns, and animals that were vegetarian or were vegan, plant eaters, now became carnivores. So there were changes that went on, including like the Venus flytrap and these things, because in the beginning, I believe that there was no death. So yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get you out of here. I don't want you to be late. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to the audience. And don't forget to be kind to yourself and be kind to each other, as I always say. So thank you very much for joining us. Big thanks to our channel members, especially Nada and Ho64. And I will catch you next time with another interview or debate or something else going on. So take care and keep well.
Later, everyone.